And that takes us to our next presentation, which is Designing for Adaptability, a Modular Approach to Library Instruction, presented by Max Thorn and Leila Walker. Leila Walker is the Digital Scholarship Librarian at Queen's College, CUNY. Her PhD is in British Romantic Literature. Max Thorn is an adjunct instruction librarian at Queen's College, CUNY. And again, 20 minutes to present, then we'll have 10 minutes for questions. If you do have a question, post it in the Q&A so the presenters can see it, and feel free to get us started.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for that fantastic presentation. I really enjoyed learning more about the kinds of instructional resources that are available to our students and for us to work with. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. So here we have Designing for Adaptability, a Modular Approach to Library Instruction. I'm Leila Walker, and I'm a librarian at Queen's College, as she mentioned. My PhD is in English, and I used to teach in the English department and collaborated with the Queen's College Digital Fellows to develop pedagogical resources for teaching, writing, and digital literacy.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. What's left of it? My name is Max, and I'm an adjunct librarian at Queen's College, and I work on library instruction and information literacy. So we were in the middle of revising our library instruction program for a major course called English 110 when CUNY shifted to remote instruction in March 2020. And this presentation is going to reflect on the course of those revisions, which were already in process before the pandemic, to both the curriculum and the delivery, away from an in-person synchronous one-shot model towards a flipped classroom approach, which draws on the ACRL Framework, the scholarship of teaching and learning, the principles of open educational resources to promote, and the principles of open educational resources to promote higher order information literacy. That's the goal, at least. We assess the successes and the failures of our programs so far and suggest how our curricular changes developed during the COVID-19 crisis can prepare us to adapt our instruction materials in the future. So a little bit about English 110, this course that we're talking about. It's a required first-year writing course designed to, quote, help students develop the research skills and rhetorical conventions they need to write well in all of their courses. There is a research component, typically a paper, but not always, designed to have students demonstrate a proficiency in methods of research and documentation, including the evaluation of secondary sources, annotation, integration of quotations, and proper citation. This is where our librarians enter the picture. In the calendar year 2019, librarians provided one-shot sessions to every section of this course, about 100 of them. Class size hovered around 20 students. And although the English department provides a couple of standard syllabi to professors, many create their own syllabi that meet the department's standards for this course. This variety creates a challenge for library instruction. Furthermore, many sections are explicitly interdisciplinary, with the same group of students enrolled together and attached to a course in another field, such as anthropology or computer science, while other English 110 sections are standalone and very English focused as a discipline. On the library side, librarians providing research instruction come from a variety of academic backgrounds, nothing unusual there. So all told, English 110 library instruction must fall somewhere between complete standardization on the one hand for all sections, and on the other hand, bespoke customization for each section.
So when I joined the library faculty, apologies for the siren. When I joined the library faculty in 2018, I had a lot of experience teaching English 110, but no experience teaching library one-shots for English 110. So I asked my colleagues to share their lesson plans, handouts, and other instruction materials to help me prepare to lead these library instruction sessions. And what I discovered was that the materials varied pretty widely. Some focused on information literacy and evaluating internet resources, while others focused on generating keywords and using subject headings. Some used paper handouts and written guides, while others used clever memes in a slideshow. Fortunately for me, our library had just finished putting together our strategic plan, and one of the goals was to cultivate innovative pedagogy that fosters student success. So I was able to spearhead an effort to develop tools to make library instruction for English 110 more effective without sacrificing librarians' individual approaches. So I worked in collaboration with the English department and with my colleagues in the library and developed a plan with the goals to create instruction materials that identify and articulate learning objectives that are tied to English 110 objectives, provide more standardized instruction across sessions so that students are getting more or less the same lessons, develop asynchronous materials to support a more flipped classroom approach, and create a lesson plan that could achieve a measurable outcome. And the English department requested that we develop something that would guide students toward finding 2 or 3 sources by the end of the session. But it was also really important to me, as I'm sure it would be to you, to make sure that these materials maintain the intellectual and pedagogical freedom of the library instructors. So what we developed was a modular approach. The modular approach clearly identifies the purpose of each exercise. It provides consistency across instruction sessions by tying each exercise to a specific learning goal. But it also leaves space for individual approaches. Instructors can rearrange the order of the lessons, they can adapt materials to their personal style, and the focus can shift depending on the needs of a particular class. So acknowledging the variety both of our approaches and the variety of English 110 classes that we were responsible for. The modular approach also meant that we didn't have to roll everything out all at once. We could develop a series of exercises and work on improving 1 or 2 of them at a time. We also didn't have to come up with asynchronous materials before rolling out all of our in-person exercises that we developed. So that was incredibly helpful in terms of just getting things rolling. The first iteration that we developed was what we called a teaching toolkit. It was a WordPress site that had 6 in-person, 6 lessons, 6 goals, and each of those goals had associated exercises that our library faculty could adapt for classroom use. And I'll just show you what that looks like. So for example, in the generating key terms exercise, we have 2 activities that could be 5 minutes each. I tend to use the Menti exercise because I think it helps to foster interactive work with students. And then there's a research exercise that can be done either individually or in groups. And these are pretty detailed lesson plans, but they are, again, suggestions. These are things that our faculty can adapt. It's a way of supporting my colleagues who, like me, are maybe new to this and just want a place to start. It also included a how-to guide for instructors, how to use these resources. And there was an option for students to submit the results of their in-class research, which was really helpful because it gave us something to evaluate, some way of knowing what students were actually learning in these sessions. Max, take it away.
Aha. Perfect moment for the name of this conference, or for the theme of this conference. We're all dealing with Zoom still, and you'd think we'd be better at it, or at least I was hoping I would be, but there you have it. So one of our main goals in this iteration was to establish an assessment mechanism of our work. And this was still during our synchronous in-person one-shot sessions in the fall of 2019. We had students complete this individual research exercise, which was designed to guide students in finding and evaluating peer-reviewed sources. We created the exercise in Google Forms, which allowed students to automatically receive a copy of their answers if they decided to submit them for future reference, for their future reference, theoretically at least. And for us to collect their answers, again, if they chose to submit them, into a spreadsheet for evaluation of what students are learning effectively and which concepts need clarification. The exercise, of course, depended on students' voluntary participation, and our choice to collect open-ended qualitative data required some time-consuming analysis after the fact.
It definitely did. I have pages and pages of student responses that I sort of tried to group into different kinds of challenges, but that's an aside. This information also helped us to continue iterating and revising our lessons so that we could improve the student learning experience. So our plans for a second iteration were already underway in early 2020. We were revising our activities to better support developing effective keywords in particular. Max in particular was doing a research deep dive into all of the scholarship related to asynchronous materials for library instruction, and he did fabulous work on that. And we used that to begin developing more asynchronous materials, including video introductions to the library and pre-workshop activities that would prepare students to make the best use of our in-person workshops. We were also hoping to create more points of contact with students so that they don't just meet us once and then forget about the library. And then March happened.
And then March happened, the big pivot. First, the library closed, then in-person classes were canceled, and a 5-day, within a week, a 5-day recalibration period for educational equity was announced by our chancellor at CUNY. This was designed to allow students time to receive devices that they may need for remote learning, and for faculty and staff to also change over their workflows to remote as well. We developed new asynchronous materials in LibGuides out of the existing modular lessons. So it was, a lot of it was there for us already, and we decided to go completely asynchronous as a matter of equity for students. And we already had some existing asynchronous materials that we continued using, and we also made ourselves more available than we usually are on LibChat for students to come and interact with us on this material.
So we had 5 days is not a lot of time to pivot, and we were really fortunate that we had developed this modular approach so that we could make use of these existing materials, but easily swap out things that wouldn't work in an asynchronous environment for things that would. In the fall, although the CUNY recommendation in the spring was entirely asynchronous, as I'm sure all of you know, or most of you know, by the fall, the recommendation was for predominantly synchronous sessions. So we once again adapted those materials that we had adapted in the spring to lesson plans and activities that had both an asynchronous component before the workshop, but then had synchronous elements for during the scheduled library instruction session. We had multiple points of contact, including a 5-minute introduction early in the semester and a slightly shortened 45-minute instruction session right around when students were starting the research assignment. We expanded the English 110 LibGuide. So this is, as you can see, really based on those exercises from the teaching toolkit. So it provided a really excellent framework or structure for these asynchronous materials. And we developed a workbook for students to complete in Google Docs. And we did it this way because we wanted all of our library faculty to have the opportunity to adapt the workbook to their own teaching style or to the needs of particular classes. Some of my colleagues preferred using a fillable PDF, so we made that available as well. And the modularity facilitated rapid response to changing policies and library access. So in our second iteration, Max, do you want to talk about the meet and greets?
Yeah, this was a overall pretty good success. We wanted to have more points of contact with students earlier in the semester. And since our workshops tend to be later in the semester when they had worked up to the research project through the course of the semester, this got positive reactions from faculty and helped us establish a rapport with them and provided a crucial place for housekeeping details like how to access library materials remotely. Unfortunately, it created additional scheduling work, and we failed to seek feedback from students on what they thought of it, although many librarians reported believing that it helped the workshops begin more smoothly.
That was definitely my experience. So our first point of contact was that brief little meet and greet. Our second point of contact was in these asynchronous workbooks, which I just showed you. I thought the workbooks worked really well. The faculty seemed to think that they drove home the points that faculty wanted covered in these instruction sessions. They established new possibilities for instruction, which we'll talk about in our evaluation of the workshops. They also created some challenges that we didn't really foresee, but that we can work on now. Not all of the students completed the workbooks. The responses suggest that the exercises were confusing, but again, because it was modular, we're going to be able to just swap out the exercises that were confusing for ones that are hopefully a little less confusing. And then there was an issue with integration with course syllabi. Some faculty in the English department already covered concepts that were covered in the workbooks, and it wasn't always clear who was responsible for making sure that students develop appropriate key terms and research questions. I'm sorry, did you want to add anything to that, Max? I just talked.
No, that's fine. I would only add that the timing of the workbooks was also a little bit difficult with the course syllabi and really also the timing of the workshops, which we'll get to in a moment. But there's a very narrow window of time in a semester when this material is most useful, or most of this material is most useful to students, which is after they've been introduced to their research project, but before they have gotten too far into it that they can't use what they learn, hopefully, in our library instruction. We haven't figured out a way around that one. We'll come back to that idea momentarily.
Yeah.
We've got 1 minute left, so we'll speed through the
in the second iteration, what I thought worked really well in the workshops was that the workbook enabled more targeted instruction. So I could design lessons that engaged with the actual research questions that students had. Early synchronous and asynchronous contact made the black boxes more familiar, like because I knew what projects particular students were working on. When we all have that uncomfortable gap, I was able to talk to a specific student and draw them out and develop a cleaner rapport and a more friendly and engaging atmosphere with students. And then the interactive presentations tools that we were using, I thought that they really engaged our students. You can see here one of the Menti presentations that I made, and you can see down in the bottom corner there the way that students are interacting. So even though there are these black boxes and students are maybe uncomfortable talking, I'm sure we've all had that experience, there are these opportunities for engagement, both in the asynchronous workbook and then in the synchronous instruction session. But we still have some challenges that we're working on. Max, do you want to talk about these or do you want me to?
Sure, yes. So I taught over 40 of these sections in the fall, and I think we discovered that the library experiences varied by the volume. I was less sanguine about the workbooks and the workshops. I wish I could have had more familiarity with the students, as Leila described, but I just had so many of these to do that I wasn't really able to, I didn't notice much of a difference. Student engagement is harder over Zoom. I think we all know this. It doesn't, bear dwelling on too much, but there's just so much you can tell when you're in person with people, or at least can see them on the screen. Even though we agree that CUNY makes the right choice by not requiring students to turn on their video during sessions. So how to get around that? Not sure yet. Although, I think the interactive software that Leila showed is a really promising direction. And then the lack of structure sometimes led me to do more lecturing than I really wanted to. I'd see student workbook responses struggling to develop a research question or generating key terms, and I'd feel the need to spend what often ended up being most of the workshop talking about these topics because I felt like we had to get to that point before we could move on. And this is this reflected a failure of our workbooks to prepare the students to get up to that point.
That's something we're working on.
Yeah. And what was really, apparent to me in those moments was the lack of an option for interactive activities to review those skills. So we didn't anticipate that, and we didn't give ourselves any tools to adjust.
But we're looking ahead to the third iteration with our future goals. We're collaborating once again with the English department, and they are reviewing the workbook with us to revise it and create deadlines so that we don't get 30 workbooks 10 minutes before the instruction session. We're going to rebuild the workshops around problem solving so that they can be much more interactive than they are now. We're still hoping to increase the points of contact. We want to be part of English 110 students' experience of research at Queens College. And we're also going to create workshops for our library instructors. So we created these materials with the goal of supporting our faculty in teaching these instruction sessions. And in doing so, we realized that we need to focus more on pedagogy generally and talk about what we're actually doing in the classroom and how we can go about using these lesson plans most effectively. And I know we've gone a little bit over, but thank you for your patience. I think we're ready for Q&As, right?
Yeah, thank you very much. That was fantastic, and it has generated some questions that I'm hoping you would like to answer. You just feel free to pick and choose as you will.
I would love to. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see all of you. And approximately what percentage of students chose to submit or share their research exercises? In my experience, it varied from about a quarter to about half. What was your experience, Max?
Yeah, I anecdotally around that, but this is something we haven't tallied up.
Yeah.
Not explicitly.
But yeah, that's something we could.
The bigger problem was that they would finish them like 10 minutes before class, which understandable, you know. I was a student until very recently, so I feel that. So that's the reason why we have decided to institute a deadline for this material so that it can actually be useful for us when we're preparing the workshops.
Okay. And this is an interesting question that came in on chat. Did you find a difference in reactions from full-time versus adjunct librarians? And definitely the difference, I think, or one of the big differences between my experience and Max's is I'm full-time faculty, so I have a lot more time available to me, while Max is our beloved adjunct. And I think, I don't want to speak for you, Max, but it seemed like the time issues were very challenging.
I usually max out my appointment hours by the end of the semester.
Yeah.
But the fall is much busier than the spring. So our cycle right now is that in the spring, when we have maybe half or even a quarter of as many English 110 sections, we spend more time on assessment and thinking about changing our curriculum. In the summer as well. But then when the fall hits, this pretty much just, you got to kind of, I at least, have to just stick with what we've, I don't have a lot of time to make a lot of changes if something isn't working.
And I see a question from the Q&A. Is there a Creative Commons license for the workbook, and are we okay with other librarians? Oh, it just went away. Did you just answer that, Max?
Oh, sorry, I just answered it by typing and I didn't realize it would go away.
Oh, okay. But the answer is absolutely yes. We have a CC license, and if you want to adapt it, I would be very honored. And maybe I will put that link in the chat if I can find where that tab went.
This is another question that we've gotten a couple times. What do you cover in the meet and greet session? The librarian would introduce themselves, talk about what services are available in the library building, which reopened in a very limited capacity beginning in the fall of 2020. And students had to make reservations, and there was a COVID protocol for getting on campus. So we would give students a heads up about that, but then reassure them that, you know, any information that they needed through the library to be successful in their course, they should be able to find online. And we gave them a heads up for how to access online materials remotely so that they could get a chance to address any problems and be ready to go when the workshop rolled around later in the semester. They only lasted like, 10 minutes. Super short. Yeah.
How did we insert Google Doc question links into the presentation? Did we insert Google Docs questions into the presentation, Max?
I'm not sure I understand which presentation our questioner is referring to.
We embedded
Talking about a presentation that we gave to students in English 110, or the presentation? Didn't you say there were quizzes?
Yeah, we embedded the research exercise into the LibGuide, and I think because most of the synchronous sessions were being taught on Zoom, I would share links in like the Zoom chat.
Yeah. Any ideas from this project that you might adapt to teaching library sessions outside of English 110? I will throw this one to Leila because I only do English 110 for now.
Yeah, that's something that's something that I would really like to do. And I've been talking about with my colleague, Nancy, who has taken it upon herself to make us all better subject area specialists. And so we absolutely want to make these resources adaptable for use in other kinds of library instruction. And this is another case where having a really modular approach can be beneficial. So the things that work in other environments can be taken out all the way, adapted, and the things that are really specific to English 110 can just get left behind. But I'm a little overwhelmed this semester, so that's going to be a summer project.
And the last one that I want to answer because I had it in my notes to say during our presentation was Paul Glassman asking how central to your strategy is incentivizing faculty members to incorporate your material in syllabi, and what is your most effective / successful approach? It has been almost frictionless, and that is something I want to explore. The English faculty have basically let us do whatever we want. But I think at the root of that might be some of the problems that we're having with, low student completion rate of the workbooks, confusion maybe over whether librarians are expected to teach students how to develop research, or at least go over that with students, how to develop research questions, where the English instruction ends and library instruction begins.
Yeah, that's something oh, go ahead, sorry.
I think it was suspiciously easy for the English faculty to add the workbook to their students' workloads. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know what that means, but I want to explore it more.
I mean, I think bringing the English department in during the planning stage really helped. So we had a sense of what their expectations were for the library instruction session, and what activities and exercises would best support what their students were learning throughout the whole semester. So I think that was really helpful. I also think, I watched as the English department tried to pivot over the summer and develop sample syllabi and 4 different approaches to English 110 instruction during remote times. And I think just having more resources available to help that process, they seemed really grateful to have one more thing to help them.
Well,
that was my experience.
The only thing I'll add to that is that Leila has worked very closely with the director of the first year writing program. So, frankly, it's a pretty top-down approach. Leila and work together to come up with what library instruction for this course should look like. And then, that's made clear, that expectation is made clear to English faculty who are assigned to these courses.
Yeah. And I think it also helps that I taught English 110 for as many years as I did. So I have a sense that, these are my former colleagues or current colleagues. That was really helpful in preparing these materials and communicating with the English department.
All right. Well, thank you both for that presentation. It was a really great presentation, and we're really happy that you both could be here today. And with that, I think we are ready to break for lunch. We'll be back at 1 p.m. and hope to see you all there.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.